Welcome to this episode of the Harpreet Singh Show. I'm your host Harpreet Singh from Surrey, British Columbia, Canada. In today's program, we are going to go over to Chandigarh, and my host guest will be Mr. Karan Singh Sidhu, who is a senior IAS officer and is the Special Chief Secretary, Punjab. Since the past few months, we have been talking to him about the essentials of the ancient scriptures, and today we'll focus on the Holy Gita. What is the relevance of Gita in one's life, and what can be learned from Gita? We'll focus on this aspect. So let's go over to Chandigarh and welcome Mr. Karan Singh Sidhu. Mr. Sidhu, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank
you
you
very
for
much.
having me.
It's always a pleasure. And today we'll focus on Gita. This is a scripture about which a lot of talks are held. And it is said that if one wants to learn what life is all about, one should definitely read Gita. What has been your experience? We'll start from that. And what can we learn from Gita?
As you rightly said, that the very essence of life, what is the meaning of life, what is the purpose of life, some very fundamental questions that any thinking and discerning individual does ask himself sooner or later in his life are actually answered by Bhagavad Gita. And to put the things in a perspective and a scale, that the Holy Bhagavad Gita, which is a part of the epic Mahabharata. So Mahabharata, written by Rishi Vyas, has 1 lakh verses, and of that 700 verses are the Holy Bhagavad Gita. So therefore you see the essence and the extract for life is presented there in the Holy Bhagavad Gita. By way of proactive disclosure, I may say that I am not a Sanskrit scholar or a person who's done in-depth study. But as a practicing individual, I have tried to delve into some depth into the teachings, into whatever sermons are there in the Holy Bhagavad Gita, and try to draw lessons as to how, even after thousands of years, scholars agree that Bhagavad Gita, the sermon took place something like 300 to 400 years before Christ. But even in this day and age, in the COVID scenario, and even after that, the teachings or the signposts of Holy Bhagavad Gita are going to be, if anything, more relevant than ever before. Now, we are taught that on the eve of the battle, the great battle of Kshetra, the Mahabharata, Arjun was the warriors on side of Pandavas. He was in a state of doubt, what we call as Dubida. And he was asking some very fundamental questions to Lord Krishna, who is believed to be the Vishnu avatar and actually a human manifestation of the omniscient Lord. So therefore, it is literally God's word being transcribed and given to Arjun by Lord Krishna. And it is in the nature of questions and answers. It is not a guided sermon that Lord Krishna is speaking and Arjun is hearing. So therefore, it is in nature of questions. He clarifies his doubts and Lord Krishna answers. And the fundamental question, which of course Arjun asked on the battlefield, was that, how do you expect me to fight against my brothers? These are the kids, I have played with them. You expect me to pick up my arms and slay them. So it is in this context that the entire conversation begins. And Lord Krishna gives those answers. Now, 2 points.
Yeah, absolutely. What you have stated in the beginning, that is very important because it's your own experience, your in-depth study of Bhagavad Gita that we are sharing your views today. And of course, you're not a Sanskrit scholar, but the question is, right now, whatever we are facing all over the world, all the holy books, what we claim, we generally try to give it to others, means the middlemen whom we have appointed as the Granthis or the Pujaris, that they are the ones who to give the sermons. But basically, the basic concept or the idea was that these books become the way of life. And they are life manuals by which when we study them, we can learn from them and that incorporate those teachings into our daily life. So from your wisdom, Mr. Sidhu, you have a long experience, over 36 years being in the IAS as a senior IAS officer. You have taught also at Missouri to the young students or to the new entrants into IAS, and you have been of late on social media. We've been finding you talking about life lessons. So that is the sense I would again like to clarify with our viewers all over. So that our purpose of talking is that whatever experience you have, your wisdom which you have got from learning and reading these books, we share with others. So please carry on.
Basically today I'm going to be talking about one of the tenets, and rather twin tenets, which Lord Krishna says. One is eventually we all have to die. And at the same time, the essence of Gita is also that the soul is immortal. So normally we don't reach up to this point and we get kind of enmeshed in the main two sermons, which I would sermonize to place it in the context. First is we say, do your dharma. That means not just your profession. Okay, do it that with a skilled hand. But dharma is a higher calling, your purpose and finding your purpose in life and doing that dharma. And that is what is the essence of Holy Bhagavad Gita, to find, okay, I'm an IAS officer, but do I have a duty, some higher duty towards the youngsters coming into the service, some youngsters aspiring for other careers. So therefore, that is one of the lessons, of course, which is often talked about, but we'll touch that maybe sometime later in some different episode. The other is, which is drilled down into us, कि फल की इच्छा मत करो, do not expect the fruit of your labor. Now, it has to be distinguished. The fruit of your labor is in the nature of a personal dividend. You're doing something for a person. There, Lord Krishna says, do your duty diligently and do not keep an eye on what dividends, what fruit of your labor is rewarding you with. But here the caveat which I wanted just a minute to flag is that it does not mean you work mindlessly and blindfoldedly. Your decisions have to be discerning decisions, because every action, every word that you speak is preceded by a decision, by a thought in your mind. And you've got to be very discerning, because you may not be bothered about your personal rewards. But when you are a man of influence, when you have followers, when people rely on you, there may be one person, there may be 1,000 persons, there may be 100,000 persons, your constituency, your voters, your citizens, your employees, your customers. If they are going to be affected by your decisions have to be discerning decisions.
Right.
So the two basic tenets of Holy Bhagavad Gita is that A, do your dharma, the higher calling, but with a sense of detachment, and don't expect fruit which is personal in nature to you, but be discerning. Those decisions are going to have an impact on your stakeholders.
Absolutely.
So those are the basic points which generally we talk about.
Absolutely. It's time for a short break. We'll go for a break. We'll be back and then talk in details about these two important points, what you have touched, what we need to understand, comprehend, and how to incorporate these things, this thinking in our daily life, so that in whatever field we are, we understand what our purpose is and how we can achieve that higher purpose also. So let's go for a break. We'll be shortly back.
ਕੁਦਰਤ ਦੇ ਸੌਮਿਆਂ ਦੀ ਵਰਤੋਂ ਆਯੁਰਵੇਦਾ ਰਾਹੀਂ 5000 ਸਾਲਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਚੱਲਦੀ ਆ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਹੁਣ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੀ ਬਣਾਏ ਗਏ ਹੈਲਥ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਅਪਰੂਵਡ 100% ਸ਼ੁੱਧ ਆਯੁਰਵੈਦਿਕ ਡਾਇਟਰੀ ਸਪਲੀਮੈਂਟਸ ਦਾ ਲਾਭ ਲੈ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ। ਸਟ੍ਰੈਸ, ਐਂਗਜ਼ਾਇਟੀ, ਇਨਸੋਮਨੀਆ, ਬਲੱਡ ਸ਼ੂਗਰ, ਕਿਡਨੀ, ਬਲੈਡਰ, ਹਾਜ਼ਮਾ, ਆਈਸਾਈਟ ਜਾਂ ਕਿਸੇ ਵੀ ਕਿਸਮ ਦੀ ਬਿਮਾਰੀ ਦਾ ਆਰਗੈਨਿਕ ਇਲਾਜ, ਜੋੜਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਦਰਦਾਂ ਤੇ ਸਰੀਰਕ ਮਸਾਜ ਲਈ ਕਈ ਕਿਸਮ ਦੇ ਆਯੁਰਵੈਦਿਕ ਤੇਲ ਵੀ ਉਪਲਬਧ ਹਨ। ਹੋਲਸੇਲ ਕੀਮਤਾਂ ਲਈ ਕਾਲ 604 628 2003।
Karan thought she won a gift card, but we had a much bigger surprise for her. We rise by lifting others. Basant Motors.
ਵੈਨ ਕਾਸਾ ਟਾਈਲ ਅਤੇ ਸਟੋਨ ਸ਼ੋਰੂਮ ਇੱਕ ਐਸੀ ਥਾਂ ਹੈ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਹੋਲਸੇਲ ਕੀਮਤਾਂ ਤੇ ਹਰ ਕਿਸਮ ਦੀਆਂ ਟਾਈਲਸ, ਸਟੋਨ, ਮਾਰਬਲ, ਬੈਕਸਪਲੈਸ਼, ਮੋਜ਼ੇਕ ਆਦਿ ਵਾਜਬ ਕੀਮਤਾਂ ਤੇ ਮਿਲ ਸਕਦਾ ਹੈ। ਇਟਾਲੀਅਨ, ਸਪੈਨਿਸ਼, ਚਾਈਨੀਜ਼ ਪੋਰਸਲਨ ਜਾਂ ਸਿਰੈਮਿਕ ਟਾਈਲਸ ਜਾਂ ਮਾਰਬਲ ਸਪੈਸ਼ਲ ਆਰਡਰ ਤੇ ਜਾਂ ਕਲੀਅਰੈਂਸ ਤੇ ਲੈ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ। ਮਾਲਕ ਡਾਇਰੈਕਟ ਟਾਈਲਸ ਇੰਪੋਰਟ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਨ, ਜਿਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਵਧੀਆ ਕੁਆਲਿਟੀ ਦਾ ਸਮਾਨ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਘਰ ਦਾ ਸ਼ਿੰਗਾਰ ਬਣਾ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ। ਅੱਜ ਹੀ ਵਿਜ਼ਿਟ ਕਰੋ 13042 ਐਵਨਿਊ ਸਰੀ। ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਹਿੰਦੀ ਵਿੱਚ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਨ ਲਈ ਕਾਲ ਕਰੋ 604 330 7363 604 330 7363।
ਕੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸਰੀ, ਡੈਲਟਾ, ਰਿਚਮੰਡ, ਐਬਸਫੋਰਡ ਜਾਂ ਵੈਂਕੂਵਰ ਵਿੱਚ ਨਵਾਂ ਘਰ ਬਣਾਉਣ ਬਾਰੇ ਸੋਚ ਰਹੇ ਹੋ ਜਾਂ ਫਿਰ ਪੁਰਾਣੇ ਘਰ ਨੂੰ ਰੈਨੋਵੇਟ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਹੋ? ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਲੋੜ ਹੈ ਇੱਕ ਤਜਰਬੇਕਾਰ ਬਿਲਡਰ, ਇੱਕ ਕ੍ਰੀਏਟਿਵ ਇੰਟੀਰੀਅਰ ਡਿਜ਼ਾਈਨਰ ਦੀ ਜੋ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਸਹੀ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਗਾਈਡ ਕਰ ਸਕਣ ਤੇ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਸੁਪਨੇ ਦੇ ਘਰ ਨੂੰ ਉਸਾਰ ਸਕਣ। ਅੱਜ ਹੀ ਕਾਲ ਕਰੋ ਹਰਪ੍ਰੀਤ ਜਾਂ ਸੰਦੀਪ 6048259295 ਉੱਤੇ।
ਸਵਾਗਤ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਜੀ ਇੱਕ ਵਾਰ ਫਿਰ ਆਪ ਸਭ ਦਾ ਇਸ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਵਿੱਚ। ਅੱਜ ਮੇਰੇ ਨਾਲ ਸਾਥ ਦੇ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ ਕਰਨਵੀਰ ਸਿੰਘ ਸਿੱਧੂ, ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸੀਨੀਅਰ ਸਪੈਸ਼ਲ ਚੀਫ ਸੈਕਟਰੀ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਦੇ ਸੀਨੀਅਰ IAS ਆਫਿਸਰ ਨੇ। ਅਸੀਂ ਪਿਛਲੇ ਕੁਝ ਮਹੀਨਿਆਂ ਤੋਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਸਾਂਝ ਪਾ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ ਜੇ ਐਸੈਂਸ਼ੀਅਲਸ ਨੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਏਨਸ਼ੀਅੰਟ ਸਕ੍ਰਿਪਚਰਸ ਦੇ, ਕੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਚੋਂ ਸਿੱਖ ਸਕਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਤੇ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਉਸ ਨੂੰ ਆਪਣੇ ਜੀਵਨ ਵਿੱਚ ਅਪਣਾ ਸਕਦੇ ਹਾਂ। ਸੋ ਅੱਜ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਚੱਲ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ ਭਗਵਦ ਗੀਤਾ ਦੀ ਕਿ ਕੀ ਭਗਵਦ ਗੀਤਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਗਿਆ ਤੇ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਸ ਨੂੰ ਆਪਣੀ ਰੋਜ਼ਮਰਾ ਜ਼ਿੰਦਗੀ ਵਿੱਚ ਅਪਣਾ ਸਕਦੇ ਹਾਂ। ਸੋ ਇਸ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਕਿ ਮਿਸਟਰ ਸਿੱਧੂ ਨੂੰ ਔਨ ਏਅਰ ਤੇ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆਈਏ, ਦੱਸ ਦਈਏ ਕਿ ਅੱਜ ਦਾ ਇਹ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਤੱਕ ਪਹੁੰਚਾਇਆ ਜਾ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ ਰੀਕਾ ਮਾਨ ਸਿੰਘ, ਜੋ ਕਿ ਰਜਿਸਟਰਡ ਡਾਇਟੀਸ਼ੀਅਨ ਹਨ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਸਹਿਯੋਗ ਨਾਲ। 18 ਸਾਲ ਤੋਂ ਵੱਧ ਦਾ ਇਹ ਤਜਰਬਾ ਰੱਖਦੇ ਨੇ ਅਤੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਜੇਕਰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਡਾਇਬਟੀਜ਼, ਮੋਟਾਪੇਪਨ, ਹਾਰਟ ਡਿਜ਼ੀਜ਼ਜ਼, ਫੂਡ ਐਲਰਜੀਜ਼, ਗੈਸਟ੍ਰੋਇੰਟੈਸਟਾਈਨਲ ਡਿਸਆਰਡਰਸ, ਮੈਂਟਲ ਹੈਲਥ ਇਸ਼ੂਜ਼ ਜਾਂ ਓਵਰਆਲ ਸਿਹਤ ਤੇ ਵੈਲਨੈਸ ਮੁੱਦਿਆਂ ਨਾਲ ਜੂਝ ਰਹੇ ਹੋ ਤਾਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਸੰਪਰਕ ਕਰੋ। ਇਹ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਸਹੀ ਗਾਈਡ ਕਰਨਗੇ ਕਿ ਕੀ ਖਾਣ ਪੀਣ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਤਬਦੀਲੀ ਲਿਆਈ ਜਾਏ ਜਿਸ ਨਾਲ ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸਿਹਤਮੰਦ ਰਹਿ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ। ਫੋਨ ਨੰਬਰ ਨੋਟ ਕਰੋ 7782405951 778 240 5951। Today's program has been brought to you with the support of Remax Blueprint Realities Realtor Jas O'Brien, who is well known in Surrey, Cloverdale and Fraser Valley. He is known in the community for his integrity, commitment and results. And if you are wanting to sell or buy any commercial property or residential property, you can contact him at 778-994-7450. His email is joe@jasobrai.ca and his website is jasobrai.ca. ਅੱਜ ਦਾ ਇਹ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਤੱਕ ਪਹੁੰਚਾਇਆ ਜਾ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ ਐਕਮੀ ਗਲਾਸ ਲਿਮਿਟਡ ਦੇ ਸਹਿਯੋਗ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ। ਇਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਨੇ ਕਿ ਜੇਕਰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਨਵਾਂ ਘਰ ਜਾਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਘਰ ਨੂੰ ਇੱਕ ਨਵੀਂ ਦਿੱਖ ਦੇਣਾ ਚਾਹ ਰਹੇ ਹੋ ਤਾਂ ਫਿਰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਸੰਪਰਕ ਕਰੋ। ਇਹ ਫਰੇਮਲੈਸ ਗਲਾਸ ਰੇਲਿੰਗਸ, ਕਸਟਮ ਵੁੱਡ ਕਲੋਜ਼ਟਸ, ਸ਼ਾਵਰ ਤੇ ਟਬ ਡੋਰਸ, ਸ਼ਾਵਰ ਸਲਾਈਡਰਸ, ਬੈਵਲਡ ਵੁੱਡ ਜਾਂ ਮੈਟਲ ਟ੍ਰਿਮ ਮਿਰਰਸ ਤੇ ਕਸਟਮ ਗਲਾਸ ਵਰਕ ਦੀ ਮਹਾਰਤ ਰੱਖਦੇ ਹਨ। ਵਾਜਬ ਕੀਮਤਾਂ, ਕੁਆਲਿਟੀ ਕਰਾਫਟਸਮੈਨਸ਼ਿਪ ਤੇ ਹਾਈ ਕੁਆਲਿਟੀ ਲਈ ਇਹ ਜਾਣੇ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਹਨ। ਆਪਣੇ ਨਵੇਂ ਪ੍ਰੋਜੈਕਟ ਜਾਂ ਰੈਨੋਵੇਟ ਕਰਨ ਜਾ ਰਹੇ ਘਰ ਲਈ ਕਾਲ ਕਰੋ 6045438777 604 543 8777। ਸੋ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਦਾ ਸਿਲਸਿਲਾ ਅੱਗੇ ਤੋਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਕਰਨਵੀਰ ਸਿੰਘ ਸਿੱਧੂ ਨਾਲ। Once again, Sidhu Sahab, ਜਿਹੜੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਗੱਲ ਕੀਤੀ ਸੀ ਬ੍ਰੇਕ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ, that there are two major aspects which need to be kept in mind, and the most important is the dharma. Now, every scripture teaches us that live your life the way, the basic values, what we talk about, honesty, integrity, brotherhood, welfare for all. These are the basic concepts, and as in Guru Granth Sahib also, Sarbat da Pala, what we talk every day in the Ardas also. But when it comes to practice, this is where the lack is. There's a lot of talk as far as theory is concerned, but in practice we fail most of the times to follow those scriptures. So from this perspective, I would like this important aspect of dharma, because dharma also we can just kind of confide it to just our dharam, which is our mazhab most of the time. So can you please substantiate on this particular point as to how can we understand this concept of dharma and incorporate it?
First of all, it's very clear that dharma in the context of Holy Bhagavad Gita is not dharam as in a religion in the traditional sense of the word. Dharma means your higher sacred calling, your purpose for being on the planet. So therefore, it is in pursuit of that with a discerning mind that you are supposed to pursue your dharma. But as I said, generally in terms of dharma and in terms of doing your duty and doing your duty without reward of a personal fruit and labor, that generally has been talked about, and also we talked about in the previous episode. My intention today is to talk more about two twin things which rather look a little contradictory and are very relevant if you draw some very elementary consequences, and they actually help you to take the second step towards the performance of your dharma. The two things which the Holy Bhagavad Gita says: firstly, eventually we all have to die. That is one very clear message.
Right.
It is of course a universal truth. I mean, no one is contesting it. And the other is that the soul is immortal. Now, how do you balance these two, and what does a normal householder, an average citizen, irrespective of his formal religion, how does he actually ingest these two into his everyday life? Now, we all have to die. Lord Krishna told Arjun on the eve of the battle when he was flinching from performing his duty. Lord Krishna said that 100 years ago, 150 years ago, none of the people who are alive today were even existing. And that holds even today. You have a 7 billion population, but 100 years, 125 years, none of us were there on this planet. And similarly, 100 years, 125 years down the line, even what is a newborn child may no longer be there. So the message is to tell the ordinary householder that we are basically and essentially tourists and guests and visitors on this planet, and that time that you have at your disposal to do your dharma and log in your karmic points is limited. So this reminding you of death and saying that eventually we all have to die is to remind that in spite of the fact that we do realize that we all have to die, Chinta taki kijiye jo anhoni hoye, our own Gurbani states. But it is a message which is being reinforced that please, whatever mission that you adopt for yourself, kindly do it expeditiously, do not have indefinite and infinite time. The second point, which again emerges, which is also what Lord Krishna says a Karam Yogi should be, that he has to perform multifarious duties. He has to do his duties as a son, as a husband, as a father. He has his attachments by way of his relationships, his family, his duties towards his own subjects and praja and so on. So therefore, by saying that eventually we all have to die, it talks in terms of being and working and doing your duty wholeheartedly, but with a sense of non-attachment. So therefore, the inference that we have to actually draw is that fine, we have to do our duties, official, personal, familial, and other corporate social responsibility, service to the community, seva, fine, do it, but do it expeditiously because our time on this planet is limited. So when the Lord and the sermon of Bhagavad Gita is reminding us of our mortality, it is essentially so that we are goaded and impelled and kind of shaken from our slumber that this time is limited. Come, let's do our duty, our dharma, and therefore let us not waste time in procrastination. And also, what is your legacy? What type of legacy you want to leave? And that legacy is not in terms of the estate that you leave to your kids. It is what place you actually carve out in the hearts of the people. It is not the title by which you are called. It is by what thoughts and memories you are recalled when you are no longer on the scene. So this is the essence of Gita, that please, within this finite time that you have at your disposal, do your best, do expeditiously, and do not be just caught in the web of doubt.
Great.
And secondly,
Sidhu, it's again a time for a break. We'll go for a break and come back and continue with the discussion in the last segment. You very rightly said, we are not here on a permanent visa. It's a tourist visa and it's going to expire one day or the other. But why is it that we are not able to understand this concept, and how with discernity, as you said, that is the most important and essential point, that we have to do all our duties, but along with that, how to carry on that wisdom which has been given to us by the Bhagavad Gita. We'll talk about this after this short break.
ਭਾਰਤ ਪੈਸੇ ਭੇਜਣੇ ਹੋਣ ਜਾਂ ਫਿਰ ਮੰਗਵਾਣੇ ਹੋਣ ਤੇ ਯਾਦ ਰੱਖੋ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਫੋਰੈਕਸ ਨੂੰ ਤਸੱਲੀ ਬਖਸ਼ ਸੇਵਾਵਾਂ ਅਤੇ ਵਧੀਆ ਰੇਟ ਦੇਣ ਦੀ ਇਹ ਗਾਰੰਟੀ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਨ। ਅੱਜ ਹੀ ਕਾਲ ਕਰੋ 6043491313 ਉੱਤੇ।
ਲੈਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਹੋ ਨਵੇਂ ਤੇ ਵਧੀਆ ਅਪਲਾਈਐਂਸਸ ਜਿਵੇਂ ਕਿ ਸਟੋਵ, ਅਵਨ, ਫ੍ਰਿਜ, ਵਾਸ਼ਰ ਡਰਾਇਰ, ਮਾਈਕ੍ਰੋਵੇਵ, ਫ੍ਰੀਜ਼ਰਸ ਜਾਂ ਡਿਸ਼ਵਾਸ਼ਰ, ਤਾਂ ਫਿਰ ਪਹੁੰਚੋ ਪ੍ਰੀਮੀਅਮ ਅਪਲਾਈਐਂਸਸ ਤੇ। ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ 3 ਬ੍ਰਾਂਚਸ ਸਰੀ, ਐਬਟਸਫੋਰਡ ਤੇ ਚਿਲਵੈਕ ਵਿੱਚ ਹਨ। ਇੱਥੇ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਵਾਜਬ ਕੀਮਤਾਂ ਤੇ ਅਪਲਾਈਐਂਸਸ ਮਿਲਣਗੇ। ਇਹ ਡਿਲੀਵਰੀ ਤੇ ਇੰਸਟਾਲੇਸ਼ਨ ਵੀ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਨ। ਸਪੈਸ਼ਲ ਪੈਕੇजेस ਫॉर ਬਿਲਡਰਸ ਐਂਡ ਹੋਮ ਓਨਰਸ। ਕਾਲ 6045904140 604 590 4140। ਸ਼ਾਈਨ ਫੈਮਿਲੀ ਡੈਂਟਲ ਕਲੀਨਿਕ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਸਤਪ੍ਰੀਤ ਸਿੰਘ ਦੀ ਦੇਖਰੇਖ ਹੇਠ ਆਧੁਨਿਕ ਮਸ਼ੀਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਵਰਤੋਂ ਨਾਲ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਦੰਦਾਂ ਦੀ ਸਹੀ ਕੇਅਰ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਨ। ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਸੇਵਾਵਾਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਦੰਦਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸਾਫ਼ ਕਰਨਾ, ਕਰਾਊਨਸ, ਬ੍ਰਿਜਸ, ਡੈਂਟਲ ਇੰਪਲਾਂਟਸ, ਰੂਟ ਕਨਾਲ, ਡੈਂਚਰਸ, ਬੌਂਡਿੰਗ ਅਤੇ ਵਨੀਰਸ, ਐਕਸਟ੍ਰੈਕਸ਼ਨਸ, ਬੋਨ ਕ੍ਰੈਫਟਿੰਗ ਆਦਿ ਸ਼ਾਮਲ ਹਨ। ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਦੀ ਡੈਂਟਿਸਟਰੀ ਦੇ ਵੀ ਮਾਹਰ ਹਨ। ਇਹ ਇੰਸ਼ੋਰੈਂਸ ਕੰਪਨੀਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਡਾਇਰੈਕਟਲੀ ਬਿੱਲ ਭੇਜਦੇ ਹਨ ਤੇ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਘੱਟ ਤੋਂ ਘੱਟ ਚਾਰਜ ਕਰਨ ਦਾ ਵਾਅਦਾ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਨ। ਫॉर ਸਪੈਸ਼ਲ ਸ਼ਾਈਨ ਐਂਡ ਸਮਾਈਲ 604 503 0320 ਤੇ ਕਾਲ ਕਰੋ। ਕਿੰਗ ਜਾਰਜ ਸੁਪਰ ਸਟੋਰ ਦੇ ਕੋਲ, ਯੂਨਿਟ 370, 7488 ਕਿੰਗ ਜਾਰਜ ਬੁਲੇਵਾਰਡ, ਸਰੀ। Once again, welcome back to the program. ਅੱਜ ਦਾ ਇਹ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਤੱਕ ਪਹੁੰਚਾਇਆ ਜਾ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ ਬੈਸਟ ਹੋਮ ਕਿਚਨ ਕੈਬਨਿਟਸ ਦੇ ਸਹਿਯੋਗ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ। ਘਰ ਦੀ ਸ਼ਾਨ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ ਕਿਚਨ ਤੇ ਇਸ ਨੂੰ ਸੋਹਣਾ ਬਣਾਉਣ ਵਿੱਚ ਬੈਸਟ ਹੋਮ ਕਿਚਨ ਕੈਬਨਿਟਸ ਲੋਅਰ ਮੇਨਲੈਂਡ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਾਣੀ ਪਛਾਣੀ ਕੰਪਨੀ ਹਨ। ਕਸਟਮ ਹਾਈ ਐਂਡ ਘਰਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਮਲਟੀ ਯੂਨਿਟ ਪ੍ਰੋਜੈਕਟਸ ਇਹ ਕਰਦੇ ਨੇ। ਹਰ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦਾ ਸਪੈਸ਼ਲ ਕੈਬਨਿਟ ਦਾ ਕੰਮ ਕਰਾਉਣ ਲਈ ਬੈਸਟ ਹੋਮ ਕਿਚਨ ਕੈਬਨਿਟਸ ਨੂੰ ਯਾਦ ਰੱਖੋ। ਕਾਲ ਕਰੋ ਮਿਸਟਰ ਸੁਰਜੀਤ ਤੇਸੀ ਨੂੰ 6045918171 604 591 8171। ਅੱਜ ਦਾ ਇਹ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਤੱਕ ਪਹੁੰਚਾਇਆ ਜਾ ਰਿਹਾ ਅਮਨ ਟਾਈਲਸ ਦੇ ਸਹਿਯੋਗ ਨਾਲ। ਨਵਾਂ ਘਰ ਬਣਾ ਰਹੇ ਹੋ ਜਾਂ ਪੁਰਾਣੇ ਘਰ ਨੂੰ ਰੈਨੋਵੇਟ ਕਰਨ ਦੀ ਸੋਚ ਰਹੇ ਹੋ, ਪਤਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਚੱਲ ਰਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਟਾਈਲਸ ਕਿਹਦੇ ਕੋਲੋਂ ਲਵਾਈਆਂ ਜਾਣ, ਤਾਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਦੌੜ ਖਤਮ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ ਅਮਨ ਟਾਈਲਸ ਕੋਲ ਪਹੁੰਚ ਕੇ। ਗ੍ਰੇਨਾਈਟ, ਮਾਰਬਲ, ਪੋਰਸਲਨ, ਸਿਰੈਮਿਕ ਟਾਈਲਸ, ਕਿਚਨ, ਬਾਥ, ਸ਼ਲੂਟਰ ਦੇ ਕਸਟਮ ਸ਼ਾਰ ਬੇਸ, ਫਾਇਰ ਪਲੇਸਿਸ, ਡੈਕਸ ਤੇ ਦੀਵਾਰਾਂ ਤੇ ਟਾਈਲਸ ਲਾਉਣ ਦੀ ਮਹਾਰਤ ਰੱਖਦੇ ਹਨ। ਹਰ ਬਜਟ ਦਾ ਇਹ ਕੰਮ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹਨ। ਕਾਲ ਕਰੋ ਮਿਸਟਰ ਅਮਨ ਨੂੰ 7783163510। ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਓ ਮੁੜ ਤੋਂ ਜੀ ਕਰਨਵੀਰ ਸਿੰਘ ਸਿੱਧੂ ਜੀ ਨੂੰ ਜੁਆਇਨ ਕਰਾਉਂਦੇ ਅਤੇ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਦਾ ਸਿਲਸਿਲਾ ਅੱਗੇ ਤੋਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ। ਬ੍ਰੇਕ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਜੋ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਚੱਲ ਰਹੀ ਸੀ ਜੀ ਉਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਬੜੀ ਇੰਪੋਰਟੈਂਟ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਗੱਲ ਕਹੀ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਸਮਝਦੇ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਵੀ ਆਰ ਹੇਅਰ ਪਰਮਾਨੈਂਟਲੀ, ਬਟ ਐਕਚੁਅਲੀ ਦ ਇਟਰਨਲ ਟਰੂਥ ਇਜ਼ ਦੈਟ ਵਨ ਡੇ ਆਰ ਵੀਜ਼ਾ ਇਜ਼ ਗੋਇੰਗ ਟੂ ਐਕਸਪਾਇਰ ਐਂਡ ਵੀ ਹੈਵ ਟੂ ਗੋ। ਨਾਓ ਫॉर this particular point, can you just tell us a little bit more as to how this needs to be in our mind majority of the time? This generally happens when we go to a crematorium. At that time, you realize that we are also going to pass through this phase one day. But the moment we are back in our daily course, everything, just life starts happening and we forget about this. So can you tell us a little bit more as to how we need to understand this particular concept?
You see, death is something, people are afraid of. I mean, there would be no one who says that I'd welcome death. I mean, if you talk about the Buddhist philosophy, which has some things common with Bhagavad Gita, and you talk in terms of context of Bhutan, which is arguably supposed to be the happiest nation on earth, they try and remember and try to imagine themselves as if they have died and that they're lying dead and how things are unfolding. And ultimately, it also kind of purges you from ego in the sense that it tells you that you may be the center of your universe, but you're definitely not the center of the entire universe. People's lives ultimately will go on as usual. So death is also something which tells you, apart from the fact that you got limited time, also purges you of your ego. Now, the other point, which it is sometimes paradoxical, on one side we are saying that we are not going to live indefinitely. At the same time, Lord Krishna says that the soul is immortal. I mean, no sword can cut it through. Soul is eternal. So how do you reconcile? I mean, can a murderer say that I killed that man? Sorry, the Bhagavad Gita says that the soul is immortal.
Right.
Or a person who's maybe under depression, tries to commit a suicide. He says, I'm going to die, but my soul is eternal. Maybe in the next birth, I'm going to find a better deal. That is not what the soul is eternal. That is not the lesson that you got to draw. The lesson that you got to draw is again that your good and bad deeds are not going to end with this life. I mean, you carry your karmic credits, both positive and negatives, because the soul is ultimately immortal. In fact, the belief is that if you carry positive and negative points and you have less negative, go to hell first, so that you are purged there of your sins in a limited time, and thereafter go to the heavens, where your credit points are more positive karmic points. But like a prepaid debit card, sooner or later those are also going to end. And therefore again you will be back into the circle of birth and rebirth, the 84 lakh juni and so on. So therefore You cannot say that, my account is going to be squared, good, bad, ugly here, and I need not bother. When we say soul is immortal, those deeds that you do here are going to carry on, and you cannot say that they will be purged here because soul is immortal. So that's a very important point,
Right.
that these deeds go along with you. So therefore, time at your disposal is limited. We are all mortal. And at the same time, not only the legacy which you leave behind on earth in the hearts and minds of the people, but also your own karmic credit points are going to depend on what you do here and are going to follow you literally into your next births. So that is a kind of a balanced inference and a lesson that we need to from this apparently paradoxical statement that we are mortal and yet the soul is immortal.
Right. So again, that's very well explained. But again, my question would be, Mr. Sidhu, as to how one can keep this thing in mind. That of course we know death is, that's the ultimate truth. But if we keep this in mind, that death is going to be there one day, and you talked about the deeds. So why not we just go in for good deeds only? Why is it that again evil becomes heavier on us and we forget that ultimately this is not the destination, this is the journey what we are carrying on, the destination is something different. Can you talk about this from your own wisdom as to what would you suggest as to how we can just keep this thing in particularly in mind, that if our hand is going to do something wrong, or our, we're going to say something which is not going to be good for someone else, or anything which is not leading us to the good deeds. So can there be some way by which, we can keep this in mind?
That is again the essence of not only Holy Bhagavad Gita, but of all scriptures, because whatever evil deeds that you do, the condition precedent for any action, good or bad, is the thought. So what type of thoughts are you going to generate?
Right.
That is what is the difference between man and animal. And animal may 90% of the time, 99% of the time be acting out of an animal instinct.
Right.
We have, after all, also evolved from animals, and we do have some primal instinct. But man is supposed to be a discerning animal. He's the only animal who can actually think and have ethical values. And those instincts which are negative in nature, Kam, Krodh, Lobh, Moh, Hankar, as we say, all those, those negative instincts, you can talk. Each one of them can engender and trigger negative action. So
Right.
basically, it is controlling yourself, your mind, and putting that energy towards the positive side. For instance, as we call sublimation.
Yeah.
Someone may like to be a butcher, but a higher form of sublimation would be he could be a surgeon. So that is what we as human beings have to evolve, avoid our negative instincts, control our mind, and channelize our energies towards positive actions, not in the nature of persons at cost of repetition,
Right.
but discerning decisions which are going to bring the maximum benefit to the largest number of people. That is actually the lesson of Bhagavad Gita, and for that matter of all scriptures.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Another aspect what you have touched today is non-attachment. That is another important aspect. Majority of the times, whatever we are doing, the end result is in prior mind that we want to, achieve that, and this is the result what we are going to get. Now, again, you have talked about the discerning ability. That is very important, and as a human being, we are the only ones who have got this capacity to understand and incorporate that into or inculcate those values into us. So when it comes to non-attachment, what would you like to say about that? That keep on doing your dharma, whatever you are doing, with integrity, with honesty, and not worry about the results.
Again, it's very important. These are some of the pitfalls in misinterpretation, especially our youngsters. When we say non-attachment, it does not mean being non-enthusiastic. So, if you are studying, if you are playing, if you're doing your job, you are in it but not into it. So,
Right.
it's a very subtle thing. You're involved at that particular time. Your heart, mind, and soul is doing that particular thing at that particular juncture. At the time, you know that this is a phase from 5 to 9, or maybe for 5 years, but there is a whole life of yours beyond what you're doing. So while you're doing that, yoga karmasu kaushalam. What is yoga? One of the interpretations and one of the verses in Bhagavad Gita, that whatever you do those things not only skillfully, but also with a discerning mind. But at the same time, don't become too attached to that, so that you forget A, your other duties as a Karam Yogi, as a householder, and B, when it comes to depart, then you go on a note of regret that, oh, I was so involved in this, I forgot to do A, B, C, D. So non-attachment, yes. Being cynical, being unenthusiastic, that is not what non-attachment means.
Great. Time is not permitting me to carry forward, but from today's talk, if towards the end you would like to say something from what we have talked, any particular thing from your experience of life, how you have been incorporating these things into your daily life, towards then, what would you like to say?
Now, what I would like to say is that another thing which comes in our scriptures also is they say fear is the disabling factor. I mean, even Guru Gobind Singh, Deh sababar mohe shubh karmante kabhu na taro. Taro means flinch. And then he says, na daro or so. So therefore, whatever duties that you perform should be fearless. You should be very clear before taking the action. You should know this is my dharma. These are going to be ethical, moral, legal dilemmas that you have to perform. Do whatever introspection you got to do. Ask people. But the window of opportunity to take a decision is limited.
Right.
But once that decision has been taken and that is in sync with you, resonates with your internal dharma, with your value system, then do so fearlessly. That is very important. And also, to distinguish between fear and danger. Fear is in your mind, can be conquered. Danger is like putting your hand into fire, it's going to be burnt.
Right.
To cross a motorway, you're going to be run over. So therefore, appreciate the dangers, mitigate the risks. But once you then take that plunge, whether in your everyday life or on an important mission, then there should not be an element of fear, because fear is something that's going to freeze you and disable you.
Absolutely.
And then, of course, the consequences are for the people, for God, for the government, your constituency and your customers, whatever larger family you have, for them to assess and not for you.
Great. As usual, it was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much for sharing these pearls of wisdom with us today. And of course, every month we get you on air, and all over the world people watch us, and we get very good feedback from that. Thank you once again, Mr. Sidhu. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, ACE and Mr. Karan Singh Sidhu, Special Chief Secretary Punjab, ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿ ਅੱਜ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਐਸੈਂਸ ਆਫ ਗੀਤਾ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕੀਤੀ ਕਿ ਕੀ ਗੀਤਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਕੀ ਕਿਹਾ ਗਿਆ, ਤੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਦੋ ਮੁੱਖ ਪੁਆਇੰਟਸ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਨੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਅੱਜ ਸ਼ੇਅਰ ਕੀਤੇ ਨੇ, ਉਹ ਹੈ ਡਿਸਰਨਿੰਗ ਐਬਿਲਿਟੀ ਸਾਡੀ, ਕਿ ਸਾਡੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੇ ਜਾਨਵਰ 'ਚ ਫਰਕ ਇਹੀ ਹੈਗਾ ਕਿ ਸਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਬੁੱਧੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ, ਵਿਵੇਕ ਬੁੱਧੀ ਜਿਸ ਨੂੰ ਅਸੀਂ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਆ, ਕਿ ਇਸ ਦੀ ਵਰਤੋਂ ਸਹੀ ਤਰੀਕੇ ਨਾਲ ਕੀਤੀ ਜਾਏ, ਤੇ ਇਹ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਿ ਆਪਣੇ ਆਪ ਨੂੰ ਅਸੀਂ ਪਿੱਛੇ ਕਰ ਲੈਣਾ ਕਿਸੇ ਕੰਮ ਤੋਂ, ਕੰਮ ਅਸੀਂ ਪੂਰਾ ਕਰਨਾ, ਪਰ ਇਹ ਨਾ ਹੋਏ ਕਿ ਸਿਰਫ ਕੰਮ ਜੋਗੇ ਹੀ ਰਹਿ ਜਾਈਏ। ਇਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਅੱਜ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਨਸਾਨ ਨੂੰ ਦੇਖ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਡਿਪਰੈਸ਼ਨ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਾ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ, ਐਂਗਜ਼ਾਇਟੀ ਵਿੱਚ ਚਲੇ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਹਾਂ, ਤੇ ਸਾਡਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਵਿਸ਼ਵਾਸ ਹੈ, ਦ੍ਰਿੜ ਵਿਸ਼ਵਾਸ, ਜਿਸ ਵੀ ਰੱਬ ਨੂੰ ਅਸੀਂ ਬਿਲੀਵ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ, ਉਹ ਡੋਲ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਹੈ। ਪਰ ਜੇਕਰ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਫੋਲੋ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ ਤਾਂ ਸਾਡਾ ਦ੍ਰਿੜ ਵਿਸ਼ਵਾਸ ਹੋਏਗਾ ਤੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਕਾਮਯਾਬੀ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਹਾਸਲ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ। ਥੋੜਾ ਮੇਰਾ ਸਾਥ ਹੋਇਆ ਕਰਦਾ ਮੰਡੇ ਟੂ ਫਰਾਈਡੇ ਸ਼ਾਮ ਦੇ 7 ਵਜੇ ਪੈਸੀਫਿਕ ਸਟੈਂਡਰਡ ਟਾਈਮ ਦੇ ਮੁਤਾਬਿਕ, ਤੇ ਹਰ ਰੋਜ਼ ਕੋਈ ਨਾ ਕੋਈ ਨਵੇਂ ਮੁੱਦੇ ਤੇ ਨਵੀਂ ਸ਼ਖਸੀਅਤ ਨਾਲ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਸਾਂਝ ਪਾਇਆ ਕਰਨੇ ਆ। ਤੁਸੀਂ ਵੀ ਇਸ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਦਾ ਹਿੱਸਾ ਬਣਨਾ ਚਾਹੋ ਤਾਂ ਮੇਰੇ ਨਾਲ ਸੰਪਰਕ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ 6046037555, ਜਾਂ ਫਿਰ ਈਮੇਲ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ harpreetsingh@gmail.com. We are thankful to all of you for sparing your valuable time and watching this program every day. And as I said, we need your support to further increase this program. If you are liking this, please go to the Facebook page, the Harpreet Singh Show page, and on YouTube at youtube.com/Harpreet Singh Show, and please subscribe to it, and please pass on these messages. These messages need to go to every home, because that is how we can create a healthy society where thoughts are good and action is supreme, whereby we incorporate not just the theoretical aspect of what our scriptures tell us, but we practice those and become role models. Thank you very much once again for watching this program. See you again. Have a safe evening and enjoy yourself.
ਦਰਦ ਤੋਂ ਆਰਾਮ ਐਲੋਪੈਥਿਕ ਦਵਾਈਆਂ ਖਾਣ ਨਾਲ ਆ ਤਾਂ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਹੈ, ਪਰ ਇਸ ਦੇ ਸਾਈਡ ਇਫੈਕਟਸ ਵੀ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਹਨ। ਨੈਚੁਰਲ ਤਰੀਕੇ ਦੇ ਸਪਲੀਮੈਂਟਸ ਨਾਲ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਦਰਦ ਨੂੰ ਜੜੋਂ ਖਤਮ ਕਰਨ ਵਿੱਚ ਮਾਰਕਸ ਫਾਰਮੇਸੀ ਦੇ ਹਿੰਦੀ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਬੋਲਣ ਵਾਲੇ ਸਟਾਫ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਮਦਦ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹਨ। ਇਹ ਆਪਣੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਡਕਟਸ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੇ ਹਰ ਹਿੱਸੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੀ ਭੇਜਦੇ ਹਨ। ਅਪਾਇੰਟਮੈਂਟ ਬੁੱਕ ਕਰਨ ਲਈ ਅੱਜ ਹੀ ਕਾਲ ਕਰੋ 604 596 1774 ਜਾਂ ਫਿਰ ਵਿਜ਼ਿਟ ਕਰੋ 8035 120 ਸਟਰੀਟ ਡੈਲਟਾ। ਦਰਦ ਨੂੰ ਜੜੋਂ ਖਤਮ ਕਰੋ।
ਜੇ ਕਿਸੇ ਬਿਜ਼ਨਸਮੈਨ ਨੂੰ ਕੋਈ ਪਿਆਰ ਕਰਦਾ ਹੈ ਤਾਂ ਕੀ ਵਜ੍ਹਾ ਹੋ ਸਕਦੀ ਹੈ? ਸੁਖੀ ਬਾਟ ਮੋਟਰਸ ਦੇ ਓਨਰ ਸੁਖੀ ਬਾਟ ਨੂੰ ਵੇਖ ਕੇ ਇਹ ਗੱਲ ਸਮਝ ਆ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਹੈ। ਇੰਟੈਲੀਜੈਂਸ ਦਾ ਉਦਾਹਰਨ ਇਹ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਕਾਰ ਸੈਗਮੈਂਟ ਤੋਂ ਵੱਖ ਸੁਖੀ ਬਾਟ ਮੋਟਰਸ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆਏ ਨੇ ਸਰੀ ਦਾ ਪਹਿਲਾ ਟਰੱਕ ਸੈਂਟਰ, ਜਿੱਥੇ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਲੋੜ ਦੇ ਹਿਸਾਬ ਨਾਲ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਲੋੜੀਂਦੇ ਟਰੱਕਸ ਬਾਰੇ ਗਾਈਡੈਂਸ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਹੈ। ਸਪੇਸ, ਮੋਡੀਫਿਕੇਸ਼ਨ ਤੇ ਫਿਊਲ ਐਫੀਸ਼ੀਐਂਸੀ ਸਭ ਨੂੰ ਧਿਆਨ ਵਿੱਚ ਰੱਖਿਆ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਹੈ। ਸੁਖੀ ਬਾਟ ਟਰੱਕ ਸੈਂਟਰ, ਇਹਨਾਂ ਟਰੱਕਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਹੀ ਹੈ ਟੌਰ।
ਘਰ ਇੱਕ ਐਸੀ ਥਾਂ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਹਰ ਕੋਈ ਆਪਣੀ ਨਿੱਜੀ ਜ਼ਿੰਦਗੀ ਦੇ ਸੁਨਹਿਰੀ ਪਲ ਯਾਦ ਰੱਖਦਾ ਹੈ। ਉਹ ਜਗ੍ਹਾ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਉਹ ਰਹਿੰਦਾ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਪਿਆਰ ਭਰਿਆ ਜੀਵਨ ਬਤੀਤ ਕਰਦਾ ਹੈ। ਇਹ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਤਾਂ ਹੀ ਪੂਰੀਆਂ ਹੁੰਦੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਜਦ ਕਿਸੇ ਜਗ੍ਹਾ ਨੂੰ ਸਜੇ ਹੋਏ ਘਰ 'ਚ ਬਦਲਿਆ ਜਾਵੇ। ਨਵੇਂ ਘਰਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਫਰੇਮਿੰਗ ਤੋਂ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਫਿਨਿਸ਼ਿੰਗ ਤੱਕ, ਡ੍ਰੇਪਰੀ, ਪੇਂਟਿੰਗਸ ਤੋਂ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਡੈਕੋਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਐਕਸੈਸਰੀਜ਼ ਤੱਕ, ਤੁਸੀਂ SK ਹੋਮ ਡਿਜ਼ਾਈਨਸ ਦੀਆਂ ਪ੍ਰੋਫੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਸਰਵਿਸਿਜ਼ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਸੁਪਨਿਆਂ ਦੇ ਘਰ ਨੂੰ ਹਕੀਕਤ 'ਚ ਬਦਲ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ। ਕੰਟੈਕਟ ਕਰੋ ਸੰਦੀਪ ਕੌਰ 6048259295।